to really come together to think about what it means that the walls of Yerushalayim were broken, because as I explained to my son, once the walls of Yerushalayim were broken, that was the last place of defense for Bnei Israel. And it was just a matter of time before, in the case of the first Beit HaMikdash, the Babylonians, in the case of the second Beit HaMikdash, the Romans, it was just a matter of time before they would be able to come through into the space of the Beit HaMikdash. And unfortunately, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Hashem, allowed them to destroy it. And that really is what today is. It's an important time for us to start thinking about what does it mean that we break down walls? What does it mean that HaKadosh Baruch Hu allowed the nations of the world to break down the walls of Yerushalayim, which would allow the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash? And really, in order to get to there, let's just have a look at a couple of things. The first thing we see is that what we learned is that the Nevi'im, the Rambam tells us that the Nevi'im, the prophets, were the ones who set up these fast days based on that pasuk in Zechariah, that verse in Zechariah, which speaks about the 4th, the 5th, the 7th, and the 10th month, all those special days, that those are the days. But what are those days really for? And often we think about them as days of mourning. And if that's the case, says the Chasam Sofer, it's difficult, because how could the Nevi'im create days of mourning? We don't do that. We don't just take things that are difficult and sad and make new days of mourning, which is really an important thing for us to understand. What we do is we take environments and we try and see how we can apply halakha to those environments in our lives. And so says the Chasam Sofer that it's clear, therefore, for where the Rambam was explaining to us that these days are not days of mourning, they're days of approaching a space of tshuva, of days where we can see that the Nevi'im understood that during the year, because we get such a shock to read about what happened on those specific days, during the year, we then take those specific days and use them as opportunities to say, hold on a second, what have I been doing? How am I behaving? If the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed because of the three cardinal sins, we call them Avodah Zarah, Shvichas Damim, and Gilu Arayt, because of idol worship, murder, and Gilu Arayt. Gilu Arayt means inappropriate conduct between men and women. So if that's the reason why the first Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, what are we doing? Are we in any way involved in those kind of things? And Shvichas Damim, killing a person, doesn't only mean physically killing them. You know, the Gemara tells us that speaking Lashon Hara about a person is as bad as killing them, because we can destroy a person's reputation. We can destroy a person. Unfortunately, we all know about this thing called cyberbullying, things like that we have to be very, very careful about. It's not just not a nice thing to do, but you can really destroy a person by saying evil and horrible things about them to people around them. And that's part of it. So what are we doing? What are we doing then on this day when the walls of the first Beit HaMikdash were breached? What are we thinking about? Are we thinking about perhaps that those are the walls in our lives? Sometimes we breach them. We don't put up the appropriate protection around ourselves to let things out. We don't filter the things we say, the things we do, the things that we watch on the different movies, etc. Something for us to think about. That's what the Chasam Sofer says. He says, "V'tanit mesugal lekapara," and the reason we fast is because fasting has got a very specific thing in Yiddishkeit, in Judaism, and that is that it allows us to get what we call a kapara. You know, Yom Kippur, Yom HaKippurim, it's the day of all kaparot, it's the day of all atonements. So any process of fasting that we do brings us that type of kapara, v'teshuvah, and brings us tshuva. So that's one understanding of it. The Shalach HaKadosh. Now, the Shalach HaKadosh is unbelievable. He was a great mystic. And he lived at the time of the Shulchan Aruch. He lived at the time of the Arizal. All these unbelievably incredible human beings that lived in Tzfat. They lived in, they all came from Spanish descent. They lived together. They were so powerful, so powerful. So he says, he wants to understand, why is it? But how does all these things that we spoke about, the 5 things that happened on Shiva Asar Tammuz, how do those 5 things actually have a sense of relevance to us in our lives? So he says we need to understand, because every single time we think about those 5 things that happened on Shiva Asar Tammuz, And how does that work? So first he says, the first thing that happened is what we call the Shvirat HaLuchot, the breaking of the Luchot. The breaking of the Luchot is for us to understand and to remember that we need to be careful not to forget the Torah that we learn. You know, it's so interesting. I was chatting to some of the guys that I teach, and they were talking about this great game, Liverpool, Sunday night, I think it was, and they won. And for all the Liverpool supporters, Mazel Tov. For all those who aren't, I'm sorry about that. But they were talking about it, and they were telling me about the games and the players, all these things. And I said to them, "How do you remember that?" They said, "Well, because it's important." So if we forget Torah, we're showing to a certain degree that it's not as important as other things. And so that's the Shvirat HaLuchot, the breaking of the Luchot. Says the Shalah is us not remembering the Torah that we learn. Then there's the Bitul HaTamid, that the Korban Tamid stopped operating. And what is that? The Bitul HaTamid represents our davening. Right? How are we davening? Are we davening consistently? Are we davening properly? Are we davening nicely? Are we really trying to get kavanah? Or are we just simply doing what we need to do? Then the breaching of the walls, the breaching of the walls means that we allow things to come into our world. And that says the Shalah shows that we need to work on what we call Yirat Hashem. Yirat Hashem means the way we have awe and fear of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because if we live our lives where we're really thinking about Hashem in the time and everything that we do, then we won't allow those walls around us to break down. And those walls are the Torah that we learn. Those walls are the values that we learn from our parents and our grandparents and our families and from our schools. That's really what the walls are. Then there is the Sreifat HaTorah. You know, we learned how a Torah was burned. Can you imagine? Can you imagine nothing in that like this had ever happened in history? We know about those things because we've experienced pogroms and we read about the terrible things that happened in the Holocaust. But this was the first time ever in history that a Torah was burnt. A Sefer Torah, the most holy thing that we have in our world, was burnt up. And why is that? So says the Shalah, because we need to remember, why would you burn something? Because you don't care about it. You don't care about it. That's what we do. We burn the chometz. We want to get rid of the chometz. So it says it's for us to think about how have we in any way damaged the kavod HaTorah, the honor that we're supposed to have for Torah. And finally, the most terrible thing is that they brought an idol. They brought Avodah Zarah into the Beit HaMikdash. And to bring Avodah Zarah into the Beit HaMikdash is the greatest chilul Hashem that you could possibly imagine. And that's something that says the Shalah that we need to be thinking about during this time is how do we make sure that we're always being Makadesh Shem Shemaim, that we're always sanctifying Hashem's name, that we're always doing the things that we need to do to elevate the way people see HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that really takes us now all the way to the end of what we spoke about. The question is, what happened to the pieces of the Luchot? So Moshe Rabbeinu goes up to Har Sinai. Aaron is left with everybody. Has to do something, and he says, okay, tomorrow morning we're going to have a chag for Hashem, and it's a disaster because everybody comes and they're dancing and they're doing Avodah Zarah, and there's most terrible things that are happening at that time around that environment. Whilst Moshe Rabbeinu is up at Har Sinai, Moshe Rabbeinu comes down and he sees what's going on. He sees the Egel HaZahav, and he's just kind of can't believe it. And what he does is he throws down the Luchot. He throws down the Luchot Tachat Ahar at the bottom of the mountain. It's the most unbelievable thing. These things that were made by Hashem, the letters were on Hashem. But the Midrash tells us that as Moshe Rabbeinu saw what was going on, he also noticed that the letters that Hashem had inscribed on the Luchot started just elevating up to Shemayim to go and join HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? And what that did is that it indicated that whilst we have these Luchot that are given to us by Hashem, which is the world in which we live in, that we have a choice as to what we are going to do with those things. And if we are not going to engage in the gifts and the beauty and the warmth that Hashem gives to us, so then those letters just fly back to Shemayim. And we can see that really, as he says here, the Orach Chaim HaKadosh explained to us that the breaking of the Luchot that Moshe Rabbeinu did, he says that this caused us all the grief that our forefathers and ourselves have experienced ever since, including the experience of death itself. Had the original luchot survived, every sorrow and every calamity would have disappeared from the earth, and the world would have experienced freedom from the Malach HaMavet. Can you imagine that? Can you imagine what it means? What it means is that if we had just waited, we, meaning us, our forefathers, had just waited a few more minutes for Moshe Rabbeinu to come down the mountain, the whole world would have been a different place. Everything would have been different. Unbelievable. There would be no sadness. There would be no, everything would be like just one big simcha, one amazing concept. But nonetheless, he comes down and he breaks the luchot. And where do those pieces of the luchot go? And I think this is where we really have to remember what is our role in the world. The pieces of the luchot go into the Aron HaKodesh. They go into the Aron HaKodesh together with the complete luchot themselves. And we saw there from the Sfat Emet. The Sfat Emet says that if HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us the first luchot, it must be there was a good reason for it. So he gave us the first luchot because he wanted us to take something from it. But it broke. And it's an amazing thing that the luchot broke and the walls broke on the same day. And so therefore, says the Sfat Emet, it comes to teach us something. It comes to teach us in the same way as the walls are broken and the luchot are broken, and we have to fix the walls, we have to fix the luchot. It means we have to fix anything that is in fragments, anything that is in pieces. And what is in pieces, as we can even see right now, is the world in which we live in. We have to go and restore it into the things. How do we do that? You know, you've all heard of this concept of Or Lagoyim, being a light unto the nations. And what that means is that we've got to bring our light. What is our light? Our light is about the ethics of Torah. Our light is about the values that we bring, the love that we have for one another, the chesed that we do for each other, the way that we engage from our heads, not always from our hearts. That's really what it means to bring the light. And you know, we all say Aleinu L'Shabach. And in Aleinu L'Shabach, we say, L'takein olam b'malchut Shaddai. And many people say, L'takein olam means there's this concept in the world today of tikkun olam. Tikkun olam means to fix the world. And so what many people use is they use that term as the reason why they do chesed, they do good deeds. Why? For tikkun olam. But tikkun olam is not about chesed. Chesed is chesed. We've got to do chesed because that's what Hashem wants from us. Because we're human beings and we see other human beings in pain, and those other human beings are b'tselem Elokim. But what we have to do is be metakein olam, to fix the world. How? B'malchut Shaddai. Through bringing into the world the understanding of the kingship of Hashem. Understanding that Hashem is the one that runs the world because he created the world. And if we can understand that, then what we do is that we bring all the luchot and all the broken walls of Yerushalayim and all the broken hearts of Am Yisrael, we bring them and we make them whole. And when we bring them and we make them whole, and that's what Aaron HaKohen was saying, that there will be a Chag Machar, there'll be a festival tomorrow. We'll be able to dance and we'll be able to sing because everything will once again be complete. And you need to understand, guys, is that as we go now into the 3 weeks, the Shulchan Aruch says that when we go into, so the 3 weeks starts the 17th of Tammuz, and then we go into the month of Av, and we know that it says that Misha Nichnas Av Mama'atim B'Simcha. You're not allowed to have great simcha. You're not allowed to have great joy, because during that time, I mean, the Mishnah Berurah says you're not allowed to have any joy, right? During that time, we're supposed to feel the brokenness of Am Yisrael, of the world, of everything. We're supposed to feel the shattering of the luchot. You know, my father-in-law, bless his heart, he should be well, also has always told us and taught us the most unbelievably important lesson. Simcha parut geder. That simcha breaks down barriers. So there are barriers that we have to fix, and there are barriers that we have to break down. The barriers that we have to fix are the walls of Yerushalayim is the brokenness of Am Yisrael, the brokenness of people's hearts, the fact that people aren't together. The barriers that we have to break down are the barriers between each one of us. And how do we break those barriers down? We break those barriers down with the simcha that will come from us understanding that we have to build the right barriers and break down the right barriers. And how do we do that? Through love, through warmth, and through great joy. Just the simcha shel mitzvah, doing mitzvahs with great joy, as Rav Zevi spoke about last week. And if we can do that, then we will be able to see the great lights. We'll be able to really enjoy the Chag of Hashem Lamachar, the rejoicing with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, even though we have to go through difficulty. Nonetheless, we can still rejoice, and we rejoice like that on Tisha B'Av, which, please God, will change from a day of mourning, a day of grief, a day of sorrow, to a day of great joy. Thank you, everybody, for being here. And Bezrat Hashem, we will continue with Veshinanatam next week. Please, all those who are going to join on a daily basis as we learn Mishnayot, please join us. Anybody wants the details of the group, just let me know, and I'll add you to the group. God bless everybody. We are now going to have the draw. Rabbi Perlman or Rabbi Joseph, I'm not sure which one of you are going to be zoiche to doing the draw.
Rabbi Perlman's doing the draw.